Hello and welcome to a new episode of EU History Explained, where we try to make sense of today's European Union by looking at its history. For this episode, we've chosen a special location as we're diving into the history of an institution at the heart of pan-European democracy, the European Parliament. So come along as we step inside and uncover the story behind this institution. Designed to represent the Union's citizens, the European Parliament stands as the world's first experiment in transnational democracy. Unlike any other international parliamentary assembly, its 720 members from 27 countries are directly elected by citizens and wield significant legally established powers. Over the years, these have expanded to include considerable authority in budgetary and legislative matters. But things definitely didn't look this way at the beginning of our story. The roots of today's European Parliament trace back to the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951. A key step toward this is the Schuman Plan, a proposal to pull together France and Germany's coal and steel industries under a common supranational body called the High Authority, precursor of today's European Commission. Jean Monnet, the mastermind behind this plan, does not initially envisage a parliamentary body as part of the new community's institutional setup. However, as negotiations for delegating national sovereignty to a supranational institution start, concerns arise about a possible democratic and accountability deficit in the new community. One or two diplomats even fear that the High Authority could potentially exercise a sort of technocratic dictatorship over coal and steel. There are a few proposals as to whom this new supranational institution should be accountable to. Eventually, it is decided to create a common assembly of appointed members from national parliaments, whose main, possibly only power will be to control the High Authority, which at an extreme could include censure. Unlike national parliaments, this common assembly is not initially granted any legislative powers. Instead, decision-making rests with the Council, which comprises national government ministers. When the European Economic Community and Euratom are created in 1957, it is agreed that one single assembly will be common to all three communities. This European Parliamentary Assembly, later renamed the European Parliament, meets for the first time in Strasbourg during March 1958, electing Robert Schuman himself as a president. From this point, the European Parliament will relentlessly push to strengthen its role within the community's institutional framework, focusing on two key goals: securing direct election and expanding its powers. As we've seen, the European Parliament initially comprises appointed delegates from national parliaments. While both the European Coal and Steel Community and the European Economic Community treaties did envision the possibility of its being directly elected, member states never acted on these issues, and hence these provisions had remained a dead letter. Throughout the 1960s, Parliament pushes for change but faces strong opposition, especially from French President Charles de Gaulle, who resists any moves toward a more federal Europe. However, by 1974, with de Gaulle out of power, the then French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing champions creation of the European Council, a gathering of the community's heads of state and government. In order to balance this new intergovernmental body, leaders agreed that Parliament should be directly elected as soon as possible and call on the EP to make the necessary proposals, following which, in 1976, the Council formally approves direct elections. Until a uniform system is adopted, member states will retain control over their own voting systems, a situation that still continues today with different electoral rules in place across Europe. The first direct elections are held in June 1979, with 185 million voters and a turnout of nearly 62%. This new European Parliament with 410 members meets for the first time on the 17th of July 1979, electing Simone Veil as its first female president, one of sadly only 3 women to hold this position in its history. Over the years, Parliament will see a gradual increase in its membership as new states join the community, with the notable exception of a decrease following Brexit in 2020. At the start of this episode, I mentioned that initially the European Parliament has little power beyond overseeing the European Commission. However, things start to change in the 1970s, driven by introduction of an own resources system for the communities. Initially, the communities don't have financial autonomy, but instead are financed by annual contributions by member states. However, by 1970, the communities are granted their own financial resources. Once more, delegating powers to community level raises the need for greater democratic oversight and hence calls for Parliament's increased budgetary powers intensify. Eventually, 2 treaties in 1970 and 1975 grant Parliament the right to amend parts of the budget and even reject it entirely. Exercising these new powers is made possible by introduction of the conciliation procedure, aimed at ensuring that Parliament's position is sufficiently taken into account by the Council. Strengthened by its new democratic legitimacy, in 1979 Parliament will use this power for the first time by overwhelmingly rejecting the community budget. In the legislative sphere, the situation is even more complex for Parliament. Until the 1970s, legislative power remains tightly within the grasp of the European Commission, which holds a monopoly on legislative initiative, and the Council of Ministers, which holds a monopoly on decision-making, thereby leaving Parliament merely in an advisory role. Under the consultation procedure embedded in the Treaty of Rome, Parliament's legal opinion is required but can be easily ignored, with the Council often not even waiting for it before reaching agreement on the final act to be adopted. However, Parliament will ultimately use this procedure to break the Council's legislative monopoly. In 1980, Parliament takes Council to court on the grounds of its adopting a final decision before Parliament's opinion. The Council's argument is that Parliament had decided to postpone debate and send the matter back to committee. In the landmark Isaac-Lucas ruling, the European Court of Justice sides with Parliament, granting it the right to delay legislation, de facto a power to obtain significant concessions from the other institutions. Another major breakthrough comes with the 1986 Single European Act, introducing the cooperation procedure. As with the consultation procedure, a Commission proposal is followed by Parliament's opinion and then by a Council decision. However, at this point, the text goes back to Parliament for a second reading, leading to either approval or rejection. In the latter case, the Council can override Parliament's position only by unanimity. In this procedure, Parliament can also propose amendments. Many see the introduction of this procedure as a response to the introduction of qualified majority voting in the Council by the same treaty. Once again, a further transfer of powers to the supranational level raises the need for additional accountability mechanisms. The Single European Act also introduces the assent procedure, giving Parliament the power to accept or reject association agreements with third countries and the accession of new member states to the community. As a further strengthening of the European Parliament's powers, in 1992 the Maastricht Treaty introduces the co-decision procedure, whereby a piece of EU legislation must be adopted by both the Council and the European Parliament. For the first time, Parliament becomes a true co-legislator, sharing power equally with the Council. Initially, co-decision applies to only approximately 1/4 of legislative texts. In 2007, the Lisbon Treaty will make co-decision the ordinary legislative procedure, extending it to most areas of EU legislation. The Lisbon Treaty also expands Parliament's original supervisory powers, granting it, among other things, the power to approve the European Commission's president, confirm and dismiss the European Commission, question other EU institutions, and ask the Council to initiate new policies. Throughout its history, the European Parliament has gone from a consultative assembly with limited influence into a powerful institution at the heart of EU decision-making. While challenges remain, such as voter turnout in European elections or the fragmentation of electoral systems, Parliament continues to shape policies that impact millions across Europe, and its role remains crucial in defining the future of European democracy. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our channel. And don't miss the other episodes of EU History Explained.